Hey, welcome to Write More Light. My name's Sarah. I work for the Midwest Writing Center, coming to you to talk about poetry. So I'm sitting here in this very weird spot in front of my poetry shelf. That was intentional. It is August. It's 6 days into August, and you may see, if you're on Bookstagram or like Friends with Writers or Friends with People Who Love Poetry, something going around called the Sealey Challenge. Thankfully, that has nothing to do with consuming spices or going outside at all, actually. The challenge, the Sealey Challenge, asks people to read one book of poetry per day in the month of August. And it hadn't occurred to me to talk about this because I figure people are either doing it or they're not. I think it's a cool thing to promote, sure, because I love poetry. I love poets, but I don't know, like, the history of it. I just learned yesterday that it's sort of established by the University of Arizona. I'm not even sure if that's true. It might be Arizona State. I will clarify that in the next few seconds. I know it's the one with the MFA program. I'm clarifying. I'm using the power of the internet to look into it. And I am failing, actually. History, there we go. There's a website, thesealeychallenge.com, started by poet Nicole Sealey. So that's what I got for you. I don't know where I decided Arizona came into play. Information's out there for you to look into. There we go. So, I was talking to a friend about it who was like, wow, that's insane. Who would ever do that? And I was like, well, lots of people. And then it sort of occurred to me what my friend was going to say. And I started really, really thinking about it. Because it sounds like a lot to read a book every day. But first, a book of poetry is not that long. I think they average like 60 to 80 pages. I've got a ton behind me. Obviously, this anthology of romantic poets is large. It's also not the point. The point is not page count. But I do want to hold up the ones I've been reading or will be reading. None of these are over 100 pages. Not a one of them. And that is first a comfort. I'm not going to tell you what a poem looks like, how far the lines go across the page, but I will say I traditionally don't expect the lines to go all the way across the page, which also means that's less words. Usually that means fewer words. So there's that. It's not like reading, 300 pages a day. In prose. That's a totally different ballgame. But then the other thing is, and the thing that I thought my friend would say, and the thing that I think is more interesting to talk about, is that, and I was right, my friend did end up saying this, that my friend really would prefer to digest the poetry slowly and take it in and just read one poem, like, a day. And as I've been reading more poetry in my life, I mean, it's been years, and especially when I write reviews, I've learned that I really prefer to read a book of poetry quickly, especially if I'm going to review it, and then I can reread it, because this is something I think people who are not that deeply engaged with poetry don't think about. The collection's put together on purpose, in order to be read as a unit, much like albums by musicians. They spend their time, they make each song. Yes, each song lives individually, but the album lives as a full piece of art as well. And it is meant to be consumed as a full piece of art. It's made up of individual pieces of art, smaller pieces of art, but as a unit, it exists. And the poets spend sometimes, many years putting their collections together. You have to write each individual poem, but also then once you have enough for a collection, you have to figure out, like, do these poems go together? And if so, in what order? What is the narrative here? What are we doing? Or is there a narrative? I mean, there may not be. How do these poems speak to each other if they are as a unit? You know, where do they go? All of that matters, and there's a lot of thought put into that. And yeah, what I've noticed in the last 5 years, as I've become more of a poetry reader, I've been reading poetry like on purpose outside of a classroom for at least 10 years, but in the last 5 years it's gotten to be something I'm a lot more comfortable with, and something I can do, something that I have more of a practice of. And I'm not going to say that I understand a poem on first glance or first read, and I'm not going to say that like. I will definitely say there are poems that like make you set down that book and walk away, and that's cool. And also, it's cool to see what precedes and follows that poem, because it was put there on purpose. I got off track a little bit. As I've gotten more comfortable with reading poetry, as I've gotten more into reading poetry, as I've read more poetry in the last 5 years, it's become more and more my belief that I should try to read a poetry collection quickly. And I always... I don't think I have... Okay, yeah, I have an example here. I was looking for a book that I have finished, and the ones that I was holding I have not finished. This is the Book of Redacted Paintings by Arthur Kaizakian. It's a gorgeous book. Really incredible. So as I'm reading, I will mark the poems, and I've got lots of symbols that I work with that that really hit, and I can go back to those ones, and maybe I'll go back to all of them, but I'm reading it as a unit, and so I'm reading each poem once, and then if there's something I really want to wrestle with or interrogate, like I said, I have multiple symbols that I use to tell myself different things later. Then I know like this is the one to look at for X, or you didn't get this one, try again, whatever it is. That's my shorthand for when I think that I need to sit a little longer with it. But reading a book of poetry as a unit, as a single piece of art made up of other smaller pieces of art, has really helped my ability to read poetry, my ability to understand poetry, my ability to understand how a compilation gets put together. And I want to emphasize, it has made me better at reading poetry. There's, I don't know if I'm weird with the thing I'm about to say. When I'm reading a book, especially if I'm reading a book for like several days, I start to sort of get the narrator's voice sort of starts to be the way my thoughts go. But what happens with poetry is I start to use language a little differently, which I think, whether or not it helps me process the poems, whether or not it helps me process language, it does change the way that I use language and process language and move through a world in which language is our primary means of communication. And that's, I think, always a worthy practice. We are meant to use these brains, and that's a way to do that. That's a way to exercise your brain and I don't know, be a more full human. If you don't already love poetry, let's talk. There's poetry should be readable. So if your middle school teacher or whatever told you like poetry was supposed to be hard to read, they've done you a disservice. Let's talk. Let's find you the book that speaks to you, the poet that speaks to you, because it's just not the case. Language is meant to be understood, more or less. I'm gonna leave that up to the artist. If they are trying to be opaque, that's on them. Yeah. So, when I take on a challenge, I get really serious about it, and it's not like I put a lot of pressure on myself about it, so I'm being very chill with the Sealey challenge because I've never done it before. I didn't intend to do it, and then I just kind of was like, well, what if I do it a little bit? So it's the 6th, and I am on my 4th book. I started a day late, and I missed a day. So I'm on to book 5, I think. I just confused myself a lot. Yeah, it's the 6th, and I'm on book 5, 4. Anyway, and I didn't finish one of the books, and that's all okay. For me, the point is to read more and to read variety. And I'm gonna finish the books. In fact, I felt weird not finishing the book, but I made that decision that I was gonna read a variety of writers, and a variety of books. So, I gave that book a day, and I'll get back to it when I get back to it. That's not the point. The point is to read. So, that's my take on the Sealey challenge. This is, maybe not an official endorsement from the org, but it is mine. I hope that it's encouraging. I hope that you pick up a book of poetry, any book really. You don't have to buy the books. You don't have to have this crazy bookshelf. You can have read it before. On the Sealey Challenge website too, they encourage reading chapbooks. Let me see if I have a chapbook accessible. I do. Sorry, this is taking so long, people looking at the side of my head. This is a chapbook by Becca Claver. Greetings from Bowling Green. So this counts, right? This is a book. And you can read selected poems. For some reason you wanted to try to read this anthology in a day, I guess good on ya. If it's a book of poetry, it counts. So this is probably, 20 pages? It's very small. Oh, and it's signed. 1, 2, I don't have to count it. It might be less than 20 pages, to be honest. And that counts. The point is to read poetry. So, that's all I got for you. I've been saying goodbye for like 2.5 minutes now. Go have a wonderful day, read some poetry, and write more light into your life. I will see you on Thursday.